Right, you can begin the meeting now.
Okay. Thank you, councillors, officers and members of the public for coming to our special council meeting tonight. Now, before I start the main agenda of the meeting, I want to remember Mervyn Jewliffe. And I've known him for a long, long time, and I'd like to pay a tribute to him. Harlow Council was sad to hear of the recent passing of former councillor Mervyn Jewliffe. Had been both chair and leader while serving on our council, plus leader of Essex County Council. During his time serving Harlow, Mervyn made a significant contribution to our town and community. He also served as a Harlow magistrate. The council's thoughts and prayers are with Mervyn's family and all those who knew him. So can we now come to a 1 minute silence for Mervyn and the family? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to the agenda. Item 1, apologies for absence. Do we have any?
Councillor Stephen Mullard, Chair.
Okay, any others?
Councillor Nick Churchill.
Right, thank you. Okay, item 2, declarations of interest. Do we have any of those? No. Okay. Now, item 3, the council tax resolution 2021 to 22, pages 2 and 6, and we've got a supplementary on that as well, and the revised appendix 1. Do we have a proposer?
I'll move that, Chair.
Okay, and a seconder?
I'll second that, Chair.
Okay. Right. Councillor Ingle, do you want to say anything on this item?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Mike, do you want to say anything?
Only to say, Chair, that we're going to see the spectacle of a third of the Conservatives voting one way at County Hall and a different way at Harlow Council. Given that Essex County Council is putting out the precept far, far higher than Harlow, I find it rather bemusing that such behaviour should carry on.
Okay. Okay. Any debate on this? No. Okay. Now we've got to come to a recorded vote on this because it's a legal.
Chair, Councillor Andrew Johnson has raised his hand.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Sorry about that.
That's okay, Chair. Thank you very much. And again, echo your comments on Mervyn. I remember him from my early days on the council, and it's a shame to hear of his passing. I just wanted to respond to Councillor Danvers. He may think there's a spectacle tonight. What there will be is the Conservative group voting against the council tax rise that Harlow Council has imposed. Whilst very supportive of the council tax freeze that Essex County Council have made, although acknowledging the important social care precept rise to look after those most vulnerable in our care homes, Harlow Conservatives have proven yet again that there is no need to raise council tax in Harlow's element, and will therefore be voting against the overall council tax package tonight because of that. There is no spectacle, there is no ambiguity in that, and there is no problem with our Conservative members from the County Council voting the way that they are going to vote tonight. I think it's rather petty of Councillor Danvers to raise that on what is traditionally a very technical night that is not spoken on. I'm speaking only because he has done so, and I'm doing that only to make it clear to the public, Chair, exactly what is going on tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Johnson. Okay, if there are no more...
Apologies, Chair. Councillor Mark Ingle has his hand up.
Okay, Councillor Ingle.
Thank you, Chair. And I appreciate what Councillor Johnson said about clarity, and I want to add to that. In the last 8 years, the element of the Harlow council tax set by Labour has increased by £31.71 a year, whereas the element controlled by the Conservatives has increased by £303.75. So when the Conservatives are talking about being tax cutting or tax freezing, over an 8-year period, they have massively increased council tax, much, much more than Harlow District Council, and that's a matter of record. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ingle. Okay, so now can we come to the recorded vote? And Officer Simon here will take that recorded vote.
Thank you, Chair. Just as a reminder, I'll call names in order. You can vote for, against or abstain. Councillor David Carter.
Against.
Councillor Simon Carter.
Against.
Councillor Charles.
Against.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Danvers.
For.
Councillor Davis.
For.
Councillor Dunn.
For.
Councillor Durkin. Councillor Durkin. He's for. Yes, yeah, you're muted. I've seen you now. Councillor Edwards.
For.
Councillor Garnett.
Against.
Councillor Hardware.
Against.
Councillor Harvey.
For.
Councillor Hookup.
Abstain.
Councillor Ingle.
For.
Councillor Jezard.
For.
Councillor Andrew Johnson.
Against.
Councillor Eddie Johnson.
Against.
Councillor Shona Johnson.
Against.
Councillor Livings.
Against.
Councillor Perrin.
Against.
Councillor Purton.
For.
Councillor Shears.
For.
Councillor Souter.
Against.
Councillor Strachan.
For.
Councillor Toll.
For.
Councillor Vince.
For. Sorry, for. Sorry.
Councillor Waite.
For.
Councillor Watson.
For.
Councillor Wilkinson. Sorry, Councillor Wilkinson.
For.
Four. Chair, that is 17 for, 11 against, 1 abstention. That is carried.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Officer Hill. Okay, we will now come on to item 4, matters of urgent business. I haven't had any, so I now close this part of the meeting. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Maggie.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Chair.
Take care.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Right.
I did all of that on mute, didn't I? I've checked that everybody's here, and there's nobody that shouldn't be here. Adam, could you start the recording of the Cabinet meeting, please?
It's already ongoing, Chair.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, so welcome to Harlow Cabinet meeting, Thursday the 25th of February. Again, we're doing this via Zoom online. Could I remind participants that I can only see, once I've put the list of participants up, 6 faces and 6 hands. So if you want to ask a question or you want to contribute, please put your hand up electronically. Otherwise, the chances are I won't see you and won't be able to win. Item 1, are there any apologies for absence? That's a no. Okay. Any declarations of interest, please?
Chair, I thought that there could be declarations of interest on item 13 by members.
Yeah, I would have thought so. Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair. In advance, Councillor Carter submitted both of our declarations of interest to Simon Hill, of which he accepted. I thought that that was fine and it had already been noted, but I'm happy to declare it now that both Councillor Simon Carter and I need to declare a declaration of interest in the Cabinet report tonight, and I do so as someone who is a non-exec director of HTS Group and the HTS subsidiary, which is regeneration and housing. And I appreciate that my colleague Councillor Simon Carter will also want to declare publicly his declaration of interest as well on the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. So let's now move on to item 3, the minutes, pages 4 to 10. Are we happy to declare those an accurate record of the meeting of the 21st of January?
Sorry, Chair, just before we move on, sorry, a little bit late. Have you included my declaration of interest from Councillor Charles?
Yes, I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
No problem. So we're back to item 3. Are we happy to declare those as an accurate record of the meeting of the 21st of January?
Agreed.
Yeah, I'm seeing hands going up, and thank you very much. So that's approved, and I shall sign those in a virtual manner. Then we moved on to item 4, matters arising from the minutes of the previous meeting. I have none. Does anybody else? I can see no hands going up, so I shall move on. Item 5 are written questions from the public, and I believe we have 4 of those, I think.
Chair, I'm just having some technical issues, so I'm having a bit of trouble sharing the screen at the moment. I've just been disconnected, so if councillors have copies of them, they can read them out, and I'll try and share them on screen as soon as I possibly can.
Well, I think then what I'll do, if I may, is reverse the order of items 5 and 6 to give you a chance to resolve the technical issues, and we'll go on to written questions from councillors.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. So
I've got 2 written questions.
Yeah. So
do you want me to read them out?
Yes, please, Councillor Edwards.
Right. To a certain extent, this has just been dealt with in part by the council meeting, but I'd like to be considered again. So my first question is: over the last 8 years, how much has the Harlow Council element of the Band D council tax increased by, and how much is the Essex element, including the police and fire precept, increased by? And that's to Councillor Mike Danvers.
Do you want me to reply, Chair?
Yes, please, Councillor Danvers.
From 2014 to 15, to 2021-22, the Harlow council element for council tax of Band D property went up from £259.12 to £288.90. This represents an increase of just under £30, £29.77 a week. This is an increase of 0.5%. Over the same period, the element for the other precepting bodies has increased from £1,297.44 to £1,623.33. This is an increase of £325.89 a week, increase of £6.27. This is a 25% increase. And there's a table below, which I'm not going to read out, Chair, that's now appeared on the screen.
Thank you, Councillor Danvers. Councillor Edwards, do you have a supplementary or a second question?
I do have a supplementary. What is the overall increase in Band D council tax for this year, and how much per week will be the Harlow council element?
Councillor Danvers.
Thank you, Chair. We're talking about something like, from memory, something like about 60-70 pence a week, and Harlow's part of that is about 11 pence a week. The rest is the Tory County Council and the Tory Police Commissioner, Chair. The vast majority is down to the Conservatives at County Hall and the Police Commissioner.
Thank you, Councillor Danvers. Councillor Edwards, do you have a second question?
I do. How much will it cost Harlow council taxpayers to implement the stated Conservative proposal to rebill residents in the event of a change in the council tax?
I gather the direct cost to the council are estimated to be £60,000 to rerun a council tax billing process during the year, which would be a legal requirement.
Councillor Edwards, supplementary?
Did I hear that correctly? Was it £60,000?
Yes, Chair. It appears that if there is a rebilling, £60,000 will be imposed upon the householders, £2 per house, if you like, of unnecessary payment for a bill that will primarily be billing them for services from Essex County Council and the Police Authority and the Fire Authority. Harlow's element is less than a fifth of the overall bill.
Thank you, Councillor Danvers.
Thank you. No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So I don't think we've got any other further questions from councillors. So let me return to item 5, written questions from the public. Is Mick Patrick? I think I've seen you, haven't I? So Mick, do you want to read your question?
I will, yes. Thank you. This is to Mark Wilkinson. The government has given £180 million in the 2020-21 budget for housing debt hardship discretionary payments. How much of this has been allocated to Harlow, and how much has been paid out to Harlow tenants with Harlow's budget to date?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Patrick, for your question. My response is the council was allocated £294,598 by the government towards the cost of discretionary housing payments in 2020-2021. To date, the council has used £225,562.41 of this allocation.
Thank you.
Mr. Patrick, you have a supplementary?
Not on this one, no, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to read your second question then,
Yeah.
please?
Given the present COVID pandemic and the mass of tenants in all sectors that are in arrears caused by unemployment or big loss of income, what plans has Harlow Council put into place to avoid evictions or homelessness, and have mediation services put in place for all sectors of tenancy?
Okay, again, thank you, Mr. Patrick, for a very relevant question. My response: Harlow Council recognises the significant impact that COVID-19 pandemic has had and continues to have on many tenants and leaseholders' abilities to meet their financial obligations, including rent and service charges. Throughout this period, officers have sought to work with tenants and leaseholders to understand any specific difficulties that the pandemic has caused, whether through loss of employment, a reduction in income or illness, to provide practical support and advice based on individual particular circumstances. The government has also introduced constraints to the current enforcement evictions process. This has included a ban on evictions in England, recently extended to the end of March 2021, together with changes to the court application process that landlords are required to follow. Further initiatives they are planning include independent mediation services, a debt respite scheme, which is basically breathing space, which seeks to ensure a rounded approach is undertaken for what they classically problem debts, allowing a breathing space during any enforcement action that may need to be undertaken.
And Mr. Patrick, do you have a supplementary on that one?
I do indeed. Does Harlow Council have any figures for the amount of tenants that are presently in the judicial system, awaiting for the end of the moratorium at the end of March, for the process of eviction?
Okay, my response: I'm quite happy to supply Mr. Patrick with the exact details, but obviously being a supplementary question, I was not aware I was getting that question tonight. I am happy to take legal advice whether I'm allowed to give those figures out. And if I can do, I'm more than happy to send Mr. Patrick a written answer within 7 days of that question.
Thank you, and thank you for your questions, Mr. Patrick.
Right.
I think question 3 is from Alan Leverett. Is Alan in the meeting?
I am.
So, Alan, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening to you, councillors. My first question is to Councillor Mark Wilkinson. In the private sector, house sales are booming as people try to complete the sale and purchase of their home, whilst there is a stamp duty holiday. In response to my question about Prentice Place, at the last full council meeting, Councillor Durkham stated that the procedures used to re-let vacant council homes ceased when the last COVID lockdown was announced. I have to say, I think that residents on the Harlow Council's housing register in desperate need for new homes would have been most surprised that the council have not adopted the safe practices used in the private sector, particularly as many of these vacant homes will have been empty for some time whilst being made available for occupation again. How many council houses are standing empty as a result of this pause in reletting houses?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Leverett, for your question. My response: Harlow Council agreed to temporarily reduce its letting activities in January 2021 due to cases of COVID-19 in the town increasing at an alarming rate in Harlow, having one of the highest case rates in the country. Whilst urgent lettings continue to be made based upon evidence urgent emergency housing need, non-urgent lettings were temporarily reduced with visits inside homes stopped. These additional steps taken by the council both protected our residents and staff from the spread of this virus. The health and well-being of our residents and staff remains our #1 priority, and our service provision continues to be regularly reviewed alongside Harlow's latest infection rates, with any further decisions by the government on easing lockdown restrictions in a safe manner. COVID-19 safe practices under public health guidance was established in June 2020 and will again be used to address the 31 properties that are awaiting an offer to be made and an additional 30 properties awaiting accompanied viewings.
Thank you. Alan, do you have a supplementary on that?
Yeah. Now we're in February. Would the council consider using the virtual viewing methods used in the private estate letting agencies to get the families really needing housed as soon as possible?
In response to that, we will look at all options available. My original answer to this question was the safety of residents in this town and safety of council officers is a #1 priority. As soon as it is safe in any form to open all our allocations policy up again, we will do.
Thank you.
And question 4 is also from you, Alan. Do you want to read it?
Thank you. Yep. With the likelihood that many applicants for council housing are in the younger age group and therefore some months away from being fully vaccinated, will the council be making any changes to their reletting procedure which will enable to start offering homes to those on the housing register?
Again, thank you, Mr. Leverett, for a very apt question. And my response, offering home to those applicants on the council housing register is and will continue to be based on evidenced housing need based on principles, processes and priorities outlined in the housing allocations policy. These are always kept regularly under review in order to respond to national and local priorities where appropriate.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll have no supplementary on this occasion.
Okay, well, thank you for your questions, Mr. Leverett. At which point we'll move on to item 8, the forward plan, which you'll find on pages 11 to 16 of your pack. Any questions or comments on that? I can see no hands going up.
Councillor Simon Carter has his hand up, Chair.
Simon, I think you missed out at the beginning where I said I can only see 6 people. So the reason I didn't call you in there is you didn't put your hand up electronically. But do ask your question now.
Sorry, just trying to find all the buttons on the screen. Thank you, Chair. This item is entitled the forward plan. If you go through the plan, we look at 10 IO 12337 referral from Scrutiny Committee, Policing and Community Safety Annual Review is due for the 25th of February, but it's not on the agenda. We then move on to IO 11721, where award of framework agreement for legal services. That's slipped from 25th of February to 25th of March. That's already been slipped. How confident are you that it will be there? Item IO 12131, referral from Cabinet Policy Development Working Group Housing Strategy from the 25th of March to September 21. Entirely surprising given that the meetings keep on being cancelled. And then IO 9925 Regen Strategy to be confirmed subject to OWG approval. I hate to mention this, but you've not had an overview working group this year. Is that why that one is so late? And then in December we had the monorail feasibility project, which popped up on the forward plan on the day of the meeting.
Pause you for a moment there. I don't know what you're talking about when you talk about a monorail feasibility study. There is no monorail. There never has been. You've been told that. I think you mean the sustainable transport feasibility study. If that's what you're talking about, please address it properly and not try and make ridiculous political points. Thank you.
Moving on. So I have to say, what is the purpose of this forward plan? Does anybody ever read it? And I've said before, does anybody really care about it? It's just full of blanks and errors and mistakes and items popping up. It's not a plan at all.
Your comments are noted. Thank you, Councillor Carter. And let's, any other comments?
Chair.
So let's. I have no idea who's talking. Can you put your hand up? Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to get an answer to the question of why the item that was due on the 25th of February has been slipped to the 25th of March, please.
Which item are we talking about specifically, please?
The item that Councillor Carter just mentioned.
Yeah, he mentioned an awful lot. Could you remind me?
It's the award of framework agreement for legal services in support of special projects, IO 11721.
That's the one.
Thank you, councillors. Mr. Keane.
Pass that to it's legal services. I can pass that to Mr. Hill, if I may.
Of course, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The framework for legal services, when we first advertised for the tendering, did have a significant amount of interest. Officers did have a look at that again and felt that a resubmission of tenders was required before Christmas, which has meant a delay to the programme. That has now passed the tender period and the standstill period for the contracts, and will be at the March meeting.
Thank you for that answer, Mr. Hill. Councillor Johnson, is that your hand left up, or is it?
No, that's another question. I'm particularly interested, Chair, as I know most of the members of the Cabinet and the opposition members that attend Cabinet, on IO 11777. Houses of multiple occupation. I remember a lady called Mrs. Sullivan that's repeatedly come back to the chamber and sat in the chamber to ask lots of questions on houses of multiple occupation. Jointly, both political parties asked for pieces of work to be done on houses of multiple occupation. And I think it's important that we do have that report next time round. My question is, and I think Councillor Carter already alluded to it, we've had the overview working group that's meant to do the pre-scrutiny on this cancelled for the last 2 meetings now. And pre-scrutiny is a really important part of the cabinet structure, and it's a way for the opposition and backbench members of the administration to feed into the cabinet's work plan. So I'd like to know why we've got this very important issue coming to next meeting on the forward work plan, but the overview working group haven't been given the opportunity to discuss the report in the first place.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Johnson. And I'm going to defer to Mr. Keane again on this one, I think.
I think I don't know is the honest answer. I'd have to actually ask Mr. Bramage, who deals with this issue. Andrew, are you there?
I am, yes.
HMOs?
So the HMO report is due and will come to the March Cabinet. It went through the overview working group, I think in 2019, with a recommendation to Cabinet to implement an Article 4 direction, which went through Cabinet in February of last year. And that was agreed with a 12-month period of consultation. So the report that's coming to Cabinet at the end of March is a direct consequence of the February 2020 Cabinet decision. A 12-month period has to be allowed to enable any or to prevent any possible compensation claims being made against Harlow Council. And so the report is in effect still enacting the recommendation that was made by through the scrutiny process in 2019.
Thank you, Mr. Bramage. Just to be clear and to allay Councillor Johnson's fears, this has been through the relevant committees and backbenchers, and the opposition did have opportunities to contribute. Is that right?
At the original scrutiny process in 2019, that's right, yes.
Lovely, thank you. Councillor Johnson again.
Thank you, Chair, and I really appreciate that answer. Is the council saying then that the final report will not go through the full scrutiny process before coming to this Cabinet?
Mr. Bramage?
The intention is to take it directly to Cabinet.
Thank you. Councillor Purton.
Yes, can I just say that Andrew Bramage is quite correct. This was agreed in principle, but we had to, for legal reasons, allow a 12-month period before we could implement it. Obviously, there was always the chance that during that 12-month period, there might be reasons, other reasons, which would cause us to question whether we wanted to implement the Article 4. We have obviously had other, we have introduced other means to control the number of HMOs that are being submitted. And in fact, at the moment, there's hardly any, which perhaps isn't surprising, given the fact that, there's not a lot of conversion work going on. But it was really a question of whether it was worth doing. And I think we've come to the conclusion that it is worth doing, even though it won't make as much difference to the number of HMOs that are being considered and adjudicated on, as the other measures that we've introduced to do with the covenants on ex-corporation property, which has had a much larger effect in giving us the powers to consider whether any application for HMO is, prior to going on to the question of a licence, whether it's appropriate at all. But of course, there are a small number of properties that weren't subject, that are either bought before the covenant or were bought without the covenant being extended. And that it's that sort of fine judgment that is whether it was worth proceeding to introduce this Article 4 directive, which is much broader. And in the end, we've decided that it is worth it. And we've now reached the point at which we can legally proceed with it. And that's why it's coming to the Cabinet. The date it's coming to the Cabinet, as Andrew's said, is because we had to wait 12 months from the original Cabinet approval in principle.
Thank you, Councillor Purton. Very added a lot of clarity there. Thank you. So that being said, are you happy to note the forward plan? Thank you. And then we move on to a recent decision taken by the portfolio holder for community and wellbeing, Councillor Vince. Do you want to tell us about that? You'll find it on page 17, councillors.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be really, really quick, so I realise that we are getting off the time already, but I just wanted to really just take this opportunity to thank both the staff and volunteers for Rainbow Services, as well as council officers for working in partnership during this terrible pandemic. From the start, they've been absolutely proactive in terms of supporting the clinically extremely vulnerable people across our town. There's lots of things. I've got a list here. I'll go through them very quickly. Doing befriending, food delivery, staffing our food hub, prescription collection and delivery, weekly shopping for those people who are shielding, providing some food themselves, and also coordinating volunteers. And I have to say, was at one point one of those volunteers, I felt a little bit, it was like Mission Impossible. The phone would ring and you'd sort of be told, this mission, if you choose to accept it. And it was, I have to say, really big thank you to the volunteers. And this is just funding to support that work moving forward. But yeah, that's all I'm going to say on that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Vince. And now we move on to item 10. We're lucky to have Scott Morrison with us here tonight, councillors, who can offer some any legal technical advice, should it be needed, on the Harlow Investment Fund, which you'll find on pages 18 to 55. I'm moving that. Do I have a seconder? If you're waving at me, I haven't seen you.
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you. So, councillors, following 18 months of collaboration and hard work by Harlow Council and its potential partners, tonight we're seeking approval to commit £5 million to a Harlow Town Centre. This £5 million investment, if approved by all parties, will attract £45 million of inward investment to Harlow to unlock key town centre sites in order to secure growth and regeneration. The fund will be used to address extant market failure, investing public sector capital to create a portfolio of property investments. It will focus on those sites which are too complex for the private sector to develop, or where the return profile is too limited to attract purely private sector investment, but development of which will create the conditions to catalyse private investment and deliver a financial return, and most importantly, help transform Harlow's town centre. Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair. I come from a position of supporting the Harlow Investment Fund, but I've just got a few questions. First of all, can I say I'm grateful to the officers for providing briefing on this beforehand over the last few months, and that has been gratefully received. You will not be surprised that I asked this question for you, Chair, to the Chief Executive, just to get an understanding of the execution of the recruitment of the specialists that are required to run the Harlow Investment Fund. They are key, particularly the leadership of that fund, in going out there and developing the opportunities. And I'd be grateful at a high level if you could just walk us through the council's view, obviously considering the other organisations that have a stake in this fund, but how that is going to be executed and what kind of calibre of individuals you're looking for.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. We did discuss this in a special meeting that you asked for with our legal advisors. Unfortunately, you weren't able to come, but let's go through it again.
For you, Chair, if I could say, you didn't ask the opposition about the specific date of that meeting. We wanted to attend that. We've already made those concerns clear to officers. So don't play games, please. I'm speaking from a position of support. And that's been raised. No, I'm speaking, Chair. That is always that is a fact that we weren't consulted on that meeting. We wanted to attend, and we've made our concerns clear to officers about that. So don't play any games, because we're all supportive of this fund, and I want to ask some valid technical questions, if that's okay.
And you're welcome to ask those. You didn't address your concerns around your non-attendance at a meeting to me. It's the first I've heard of it, but I'll accept what you have to say. Mr. King, would you like to answer Councillor Charles's substantive question?
If I can start off and then pass it to those who are at the meeting that was referred to. As far as I'm concerned, I've just been through a very detailed, complex recruitment of the new Garden Town Director, where we had very high calibre candidates. We used an external recruiting firm, and we had, I think it was about 50 odd candidates, of which about 10 were appointable. And so we would be looking at a very high calibre person. We would go through a very lengthy recruitment, as we did with the Garden Town, because it is so important. But clearly that needs to tie in with our partners. We are just one of the partners here, but having spoken to the other prospective partners, I know they would be of the same view, because you can see who they are. They are high calibre partners in themselves. But I know Jane or Scott, I don't know whether either of you want to carry on from what was said at the meeting previously.
So just to add to that, it's very much a partnership approach, and whoever we appoint has got to obviously got to have the right skills. They've got to be FCA approved as well. So it's likely, I think, and Scott might want to add to this, that there'll be a procurement process that we've got suitably qualified people for that. Scott, did you want to add?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Thanks, Jane. Yeah, so the fund we're envisaging would be treated as a public body, so it would be bound by the procurement regime in terms of its ability to appoint. So therefore, we're envisaging it would go through a procurement process to procure effectively a commercial manager and ultimately a development manager. As Jane said, because of the nature of the fund here, it's likely that that activity will be regulated under the financial services legislation, and therefore that commercial manager will need to be a regulated entity.
Thank you. Councillor Carter.
I have more questions, Chair.
I'm sorry, your hand has gone down. But Councillor Charles, then, if Councillor Carter, you wouldn't mind waiting.
Chair, if I may, I've 3 or 4 questions on the technical aspects. Sorry, what was that, Councillor Purton?
I think Councillor Purton's on mute. Councillor Charles, do ask your question.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm grateful to Scott, the specialist, for providing some explanation around the legalities rightly with the financial compliance that has to be followed in these sorts of appointments for an investment fund. I'd be grateful at the appropriate opportunities that all councillors, where appropriate, are given information and briefing on how this progresses, and I appreciate the partnership that needs to flow within the investment fund. In terms of the investment fund structure, can the legal specialist that's with us tonight just explain and walk through, and I appreciate that the conflicts section has been updated as a result of conversations with councillors previously, but can you just walk through the level of control that a entity like ourselves that has a lower stake than some of the other partners will have in discussions around these opportunities and how they can be pursued, and what level of authority we have in making those decisions?
Scott, do you want to come in there?
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, thank you. So I think, notwithstanding that you, as you said, you've got a different position than some of the other limited partners, the main strategic decisions, i.e. the key decisions of the partnership, will be reserved to you and all of the limited partners through the shareholder. You will be a shareholder in the general partner, and that's the way you will make that decision. But there will be a list of reserved matters. So you will effectively have, if you like, a veto over all those matters that are reserved. And clearly strategic elements like the key overarching investment policy would come back to that forum for decision making.
Thank you, Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair. The next question I have is around the investment policy and the execution of, for example, an opportunities register. And again, just the level of oversight that individual Councillor Burton is shaking his head. He may want to say something.
If he does, I'm sure he'll put his hand up. Would you like to carry on?
I'd be grateful if he wants to be involved, because this is an important decision for the town. So in terms of the opportunities register.
Councillor Charles, can I just interrupt a minute? When I believe that the rules of the cabinet are that when the chair speaks, other councillors stop. I've asked you to ask a question. I haven't asked you to comment on other people in the meeting. If you could restrict yourself to the business in hand, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chair. In terms of the opportunities register, what level of control will there be between the different equity stakes that there are within this investment fund, and how can councillors from Harlow have a say in that opportunities register, because we all have a vested interest in this exciting opportunity?
Scott.
When you say the opportunities register, could you clarify what you mean? Do you mean the nature of the opportunities that will fall within the investment policy?
That's right.
So the investment policy as itself will be approved. Thereafter, it will then fall into the governance of the partnership as to how those opportunities come forward. So as I understand it, the intention is that the commercial manager would bring forward opportunities, and then those opportunities would be then confirmed by the board. But Jane, you might want to correct me if that's incorrect.
Yeah, no, that's right. But the step before that is that Harlow councillors will have the opportunity to input into the investment criteria. So that's where all of you can say whether you agree or not, and influence what the projects are.
Yes.
I am reassured, Councillor Charles, that councillors will play a very full part in this.
Yeah, finally, that's great news, Joan. I'm grateful for that clarification. And my final question is, given the nature of this investment fund, will the administration consider just amending the report tonight to add in a special provision for regular updates for all councillors on this investment? And I think that is something that would enhance this report, because I think all councillors, irrespective of political party, are very interested in this, and I would just like to see it actually codified in the report that there will be regular briefings with councillors as this progresses, because it is an exciting opportunity.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. I will get back to you on that question, if I may, and I'll do so within a very short period of time, certainly within the 7 days. Thank you. Councillor Charles, are you done? Okay, so I've got Councillor Carter next, then Councillor Harvey, then Councillor Hardware. So Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. This is obviously a very exciting and innovative idea coming forward to do much good works in the town, and as Councillor Charles has already mentioned, I think we all support it. But given that it is new and innovative, we will all be interested, and I'm certainly happy to second Councillor Charles's amendment to the recommendations. But my question surrounds the council's investment in the partnership. It's not quite clear. I know that the structure is under constant review at the moment. The paper refers to a sort of seven-year life of the investment fund, but I'm wondering how the council is looking to see its £5 million repaid, and at what stage and under what circumstances. As I seem to recall seeing somewhere that the council is going to have to borrow this money, so at some stage it's going to have to be repaid. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Carter. Mr. King.
Jane, can I pass that on to you, please?
Yeah, so the £5 million funding is from an agreement with CELEP from business rate uplift on the enterprise zone. So that's the funding that will be used. Sorry, what was the other part of your question? When do we expect to get that back? I think it's a long-term investment, I think, and I think it's too early to say when we expect to get that back. There'll be some short-term investments, there'll be some long-term investments. I think we just have to review as it goes along.
Thank you.
Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Moved on a long way, but it was just a quick point of clarification for Mr. Morrison, if I may, which was just, I just wanted to check. My understanding from the meeting the other night was that regardless of the size of the investment in the fund, the contributors would have an equal stake in the decision making. Am I right or wrong? Is it proportionate to the financial contribution?
So in terms of the strategic matters, as I've said, the reserved matters that are reserved back to the authority, those would be equal, and you would have a veto over those. I think in terms of the matters, so once you have, for example, authorised that investment policy, the parameters of it, the operation of the board of the general partner within that, as I understand it, would be reflective of the investments. So, i.e. that you would have one director, and I think that so you would have one director. I understand ESSEC would have one director, PFP 2 directors, and Homes England 2 directors. But I'm not sure how firm that proposition is at this time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have another question, Councillor Harvey? Your hand's still up.
grappling with the controls.
Okay, no, so I'll move straight on to you, Councillor Hardware.
Chair, my question relates to the kind of end of this process. Obviously, we all know the town centre, and we all know of the various sites that are there for potential generation. A lot of them are, as noted, are very difficult and complex sites with some in multiple occupation and ownership. I'm just wondering how is it envisaged the fund team is going to pull those all together and turn them into viable developments? I mean, is the council considering using its CPO?
Using its what?
It's CPO powers, I think. We just lost the last bit of that.
Sorry, compulsory purchase.
Yeah, we heard as far as using its C, and then you went off. But CPO powers. I'm going to ask.
I can answer that one, Chair. The answer is simply yes. We've looked around the town. There may well be needs for a CPO. We've discussed that with our partners, and that will obviously be a last resort, as CPOs always are, but it's something that we would certainly consider seriously.
Thank you. Councillor Hardware, do you have another question? Okay. So are there any comments on this? It seems to have broad overall support. It certainly is an exciting it's an exciting opportunity and represents, I think, the council yet again punching above its weight, contributing 10% of the fund, yet having 25% of its input. Councillor Durkin.
Yes, hopefully you can hear me now. There was a question, I think it was from Joel, about whether or not we should make an amendment to the recommendations on page 18. I think the only thing we could do is perhaps at the end of D, where it says with the leader of the council, and the leader will provide a regular update, may well suffice, and help Joel vote in the right. Well, no, you don't vote, do you, Joel? So why bother? Anyway, listen, I just wanted to say a few words, if I may, Chair, because there's a lot of history behind this. That actually it was over 5 years ago when there was a conversation that was taking place when we first discovered about the new housing that was going to be surrounding Harlow, and we all had the same conversation about what was the impact and effect it would have on Harlow, and what would Harlow get out of it as a benefit for its current community, not only its future community. And those conversations were led by the former leader, John Klempner, and actually the former Chief Executive Officer, Malcolm Morley. So they were showing good insight and awareness about the future direction of where Harlow was going. In fact, we called it the war chest, and at that particular time we did not know how big or how small that war chest was, but we were absolutely committed that Harlow had to benefit about any particular changes that were occurring. And my cabinet colleague Danny Purton often talks about that, about getting the structure right for the town centre, for accessibility, employability and other particular issues. So this initiative is about talking about the future over these particular issues. I do want to sound a bit of negativity now, is that whilst I know we're all politicians, so that we all have political axes to grind, I have to say it's been hugely disappointing that people keep jumping on a bandwagon and claiming it's all down to them and no one else. It seems like the MP has gone to his own personal cash point and taken out this money and said, look what I'm giving to Harlow. I also think it's not fair from the opposition to be then criticising and saying you'll only get this if you vote for a Tory. Actually, this is our decision, it's Harlow's decision. It's not the Tory party's decision over these particular issues over these. I'm disappointed but not surprised. Politics is always about jumping on bandwagons when you think it's going to be successful, but also equally jumping off when you don't want to be held accountable or responsible for anything you do. And I've noticed some of the propaganda that's been coming out of the Tory party about we lost the town funding. We never lost anything. We failed in our application because the government would not understand the needs of Harlow, and the two areas in Essex supported by a Tory-run county council, both Harlow and Clacton, also failed in their application. And it is disappointing, but this is actually a shared responsibility, not a council responsibility over these issues. I would like also to say over this is that this investment will provide a once in a lifetime unique opportunity. And I think I've had the pleasure of having once in a lifetime, and I know that Andrew did, when we set up Harlow Renaissance. And we had great aspirations for that particular organisation, and unfortunately it was one of those quangos that was burnt by the Tory government. And I'm absolutely delighted that this is a red letter day for Harlow and for us, that after 18 months of quiet, diligent negotiations and discussions, we've actually been able to achieve this recommendation that is in front of you all tonight. We will be looking at new ways of investing in the town, and whether or not that's on property, that's on employment, whether or not that's on housing. Each project will be unique, each project will be different, but they will be business focused, and it has to make rational sense of what we're doing and why we are doing this. I will disagree with Andrew Johnson in his statement. It's untrue what he said on social media. This won't produce in the town centre thousands of jobs. We can't physically fit thousands of people in jobs. Indirectly, it might, because it will bring other companies that may want to invest nearer and surrounding Harlow over these particular issues. So very quickly, this is about future proofing. It's actually allowing us the opportunity to ensure that we have a safe and secure way of investing in our town. Because at the moment, the government guidelines don't allow the council to access money quickly enough so that we can bid on the open market. We can do now with this investment. And whilst I say 50 million sounds a lot, actually, when me and Andrew with Renaissance, this is only a drop in the ocean of what we really need and what we want. So this is a long-term ambition to build up that investment portfolio, to build up the investment part, so we have long-term sustainability for the benefit of the next generation of Harlow, old and new.
Thank you, Councillor Durkin.
Chair, I believe that Councillor Edwards has had his hand up for a while and has been having some technical difficulties. He's had his hand up for about 10 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, well then let me go to Councillor Edwards next. Then I've got Councillor Charles, Councillor Johnson, and people are appearing and disappearing as I speak. So let's go to Councillor Edwards, Councillor Charles and Councillor Johnson, you're next.
Can I speak after the others, please? That's not...
Okay, Councillor Charles.
Thank you, Chair. I, as I said earlier in the questions, I very much support the Harlow Investment Fund, a £50 million vehicle that offers great opportunity to pump prime the regeneration of our town. And I very much welcome the contribution, of course, by Essex County Council and the other contributors to this fund, in particular Homes England and Places for People, to move this forward. Some of the questions tonight were just to understand the execution of the fund as this progresses. It's very important, number one, that we have the very best individuals in this investment fund to carry forward the vision that has in the past carried a lot of cross-party support. And that's really important for future generations in this town. Second aspect of this is how the fund executes its opportunities list. And I'm grateful to the technical advice that has been provided tonight. But as we know, this is something all councillors, irrespective of political party, will want to have a voice and shape as it goes forward, taking into consideration, of course, the financial compliances and the legalities of executing a fund of this nature. For me, I have said in meetings that have in the past been hosted by officers that I'd love to see this fund have a longer term potential. And I think that there is cross-party appetite for that, in fairness to the administration. And I will continue to push that because I see this vehicle having a far longer term potential than is initially outlined. And I know that there have been discussions about that and how you could take that forward. The final aspect of this is, at the end of the day, the measure of this fund, and I'm very confident about it, is the return on investment. And vehicles like this is forward thinking, it is innovative, and it carries a lot of great goodwill. Let's carry that forward and execute something that will benefit generations of Harlow people to come. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Charles. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. And I too am very excited by this. I'd like to thank the officers as well for the briefing that we were invited to attend, and for setting up the other one that we were not able to attend due to diaries. And I do think it's really important that we have debates in public rather than just in confidential briefings. And as much as it pains certain members of this cabinet that the opposition will continue to question the administration in the public forum, maybe even if some of those questions have been asked in private, I don't think it's appropriate for a council to carry out its business solely in private when they're meant to have public meetings. So apologies to Councillor Purton for our excessive questioning tonight that he obviously felt we were doing. I'm really excited, Chair, because Homes England as a government body have never before done something like this. They've never before used their investment strategy to leverage funding from private people and private companies and councils together to regenerate a town centre. And I think that's really exciting. Harlow's a place for firsts, and I'm really pleased every time we have more firsts like that instigated by government funding. And it's funny Councillor Durkin should mention Harlow Renaissance, because back in last year when Essex County Council were agreeing their £5 million worth of funding, and I think we should thank them for that as well, like Joel has said, I mentioned to Councillor Spence, who was the chair to my vice chairmanship of Harlow Renaissance, you know, just how great it was to continue to see some of those threads. And I can see threads from Harlow Renaissance, you know, 20 years ago, rolling into Harlow Regeneration Limited, Harlow Council Regeneration Limited. And sadly, yes, there wasn't a period of time where the investment just wasn't available to leverage a really interesting partnership like this. But I do remember sitting down at the time with Places for People, investigating how we could leverage funding like this. I disagree with Councillor Durkin, because I do think £50 million worth of investment like this from multiple partners that could roll beyond the 7 years. And like Joel, I hope this fund does end up rolling beyond 7 years and helps leverage more money in. I think it can bring thousands of jobs to the town. I think it can bring serious regeneration and really seriously affect the future of our town. I agree with the comments that Joel has already made. I think all councillors, of no matter what political side, no matter when it is, will be really interested to hear back on this. And I would really welcome, whilst we can't vote for it, I would really welcome the administration acknowledging that cross-party support on growth and investment and regeneration of the town centre, and finding some way to feed back and continue to involve opposition councillors, whether it be from the overview working group, which isn't really busy because it keeps being cancelled, whether it be from a standing item on this, or whether it be from a regular briefing from the leader of the council. I think it's a really good idea, Chair. I'm very supportive of it. So are all my party. And I look forward to the town centre regeneration that this will generate.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. With no other hands up, I'll sum up.
Please.
Oh, yeah. Councillor Edwards, sorry.
I really welcome the what's been reflected here, what appears to be a cross-party agreement. This is a very important announcement and is to be welcomed, and welcomed in a cross-party way. I do hope, therefore, that going forward, that when the news is reported on these particular items, and when articles go into your Harlow purporting to be news, they go in such a way as to reflect the fact that there is cross-party support and agreement for such initiatives. So what we don't see is articles purporting to be news, which are actually just articles from one political party, putting it forward as if the whole thing is dependent upon an outcome which would lead to a change of which actually builds up by saying we need a council, although only cut council cap, but bring back better from the pandemic, which is basically an advertisement for the Conservative Party. This is too important. These sort of initiatives are too important. And whatever party is in power over the next sort of 7 years, it's going to be increasingly important that where we can get cross-party support for these sort of initiatives, that we go for it, and that we also say to the public that we are working for the best in this particular town, and we stop pretending, as the Conservatives are pretending in this particular article, that somehow or other the administration is not working for the best in this particular town, So I hope that the flavour of the debate that's been reflected here this evening could also be carried further forward into news items, or newsletters into items that go out into the social media purporting to be news items. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. And if I've got it right, it's my turn to sum up. I can see no other hands. Let me start by thanking the opposition for their support. It's always good when Harlow Council enjoys cross-party support. I've been thinking about what Councillor Charles said at the outset. I don't think we need to change the recommendations, but I do pledge to give members a regular update. This is far too important. We don't do business in private. In fact, I think our administration is very open, and we accept questioning and debate, and we welcome it, in fact. The important point here is on page 25, the implications. Participation in the Harlow Investment Fund will now enable Harlow Council to better achieve its placemaking and regeneration aspirations as set out in the adopted local plan and the emerging town centre master plan. Public sector intervention in the town centre will help to counter the trend of opportunistic piecemeal development that has been seen in recent years, and will provide a solid basis for developing the Harlow of the future that I think we all want. I'm going to partially agree with something Councillor Charles said. He said the measure of success of this will be the return on investment. And I agree with him, but I'm going to tweak what he says, because it's not just the financial return on investment, but also the social return. And this has the ability to do both. And therefore, councillors, I would ask you to support recommendations A, B, C and D on page 18. Are we agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
That's therefore agreed. And we can move on to item 11, which is the supplementary planning document, affordable housing. And Councillor Purton, are you moving that?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. And I believe, Councillor Wilkinson, you're going to second that, are you?
I'm going to second this report, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Purton, do you want to make some opening comments?
Yes, Chair. As members will be aware, on the 10th of December 2020, the local development plan for Harlow was approved. One of a very few in Essex that have reached the stage of formal adoption. The high-level policy included in the local development plan for affordable housing is set out in that document. These proposals develop this policy and include detailed guidance for development control purposes. The local development plan panel has had a detailed presentation of this report and the opportunity to comment, of which several members did in fact make detailed comments.
What's that noise?
It's me talking.
No, there's some disturbance.
I'm not sure. Could everybody put themselves on mute? Everybody put themselves on mute.
I would move the recommendations for, as it makes clear, for a consultation. Unfortunately, because of PERDA, it's unlikely that the full 6 weeks will be completed before the PERDA period, and therefore the outcome of the consultation will have to await we'll have to follow on from the local council elections, but hopefully there won't be too many amendments to consider, and it will be approved fairly quickly, so that we can roll it into the detailed guidance for members of the Development Control Committee, so they can make sure that affordable housing is definitely a significant part of our consideration of planning applications. We need to get that in place before we start getting the major planning applications, which will include a sizable chunk of the affordable housing our communities need. So I would formally move the recommendations, and hopefully the Cabinet will approve them for consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Purdon. Are there any questions? Councillor Hardware.
Just, I've got two questions. The first point I make is that sitting on the planning committee, viability always comes up and is always a big problem with the delivery of affordable housing in Harlow. I don't know how we're ever going to get over that, but anyway, my two questions relate to the affordable proportions. In section 2.125, which is page 12 of the document, page 72 of the papers, it outlines that 86% of the affordable will be affordable rent, and 16% of the affordable will be intermediate, which is basically shared ownership. My question is, on the shared ownership, will that be offered exclusively to the people on the housing list? Because I was advised about Atelier that had to be offered on the open market.
Thank you, Councillor Hardware. An interesting question. Mr. Bramage.
You're correct, Councillor Hardware. Shared ownership properties are on the open market, but they have to be offered to people who are on demonstrably low incomes. So shared ownership properties are not exclusively for people on the council's waiting list.
Thank you. My second question relates to part 2.36, is about affordable housing in perpetuity. Now, this is an aspiration that lots of councils have, and I have to say I wholeheartedly agree with it. If you sell a house which is 80% of the market rate, it should stay 80% of the market rate and stay affordable thereafter. Unfortunately, there's lots of legal problems with that. In the paper, it says that it will pursue affordable housing in perpetuity, but it doesn't really state how it's going to do it. Now, I'm going to assume it's by covenant, but if it is by a covenant, is that going to restrict people who buy these affordable homes to offering them initially to the, when they sell them, initially to the people on the housing list, the Harlow housing list, or just to the general public? not quite clear on.
Again, thank you for that question. Councillor Purton or Andrew Bramage, do you want to answer that for me?
Yes, Andrew, please.
Do you want me to say that? Yeah. As this point actually came up in discussion at the local plan panel and in comments received from councillors afterwards. And you're correct, yes, it will be controlled through covenants on the property. And this whole process is still relatively new for government and for central government and local government to administer. This process is in relation to shared ownership properties is only a few years old. So we'll wait to see how this works in practice in the longer term. But the intention is that, yes, this is controlled through a covenant on the property. And then when the first person who has acquired that shared ownership property sells it, they will have to sell it at a discount to the market value, and the housing association, the registered provider who has the other part of the ownership, is responsible for ensuring that that is the case. And again, it's not exclusively for people on the council's housing list, but the registered provider will need to identify that the person who is securing that is on a low income and would not be able to afford a market property.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Councillor Hardy, a third question or? Okay, lovely. Any summing up comments?
No.
Let's straight to the business then. Are we happy to accept recommendations A and
Chair, sorry, Councillor Carter's got his hand raised.
Apologies, Councillor Carter. Councillor
Carter. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Chair. I realise the SPD cannot change the policy in the local plan. It can only expand and explain a bit. I was involved in the draft before it came to the meeting tonight, and I thank Mr. Bramage for the opportunity in commenting on it and incorporating some of my comments. On a more wider base, though, having agreed that we can't change policy, it's something I'm very concerned about, and I will bring up at every possible opportunity. The local plan policy H5 on accessible and adaptable housing says all new dwellings should be at least building regs part M42 standard for accessible and adaptable homes. But then goes on to say, where it can be demonstrated that it's not financially viable to deliver this policy, will new development be exempt from these requirements. This policy is discriminatory against people with disabilities and wheelchairs. There are enough let-outs elsewhere in the plan for developers to claim things are unaffordable. But the plan also points out that we have an ageing population. Even if people in wheelchairs do not want to live in these properties, they will want to visit their friends and relatives, and you will prevent them from doing that. The plan is also strong on sustainability, which includes creating lifetime homes. As people age, their homes are adaptable to their changing abilities, and you are preventing them from achieving that. The taxpayer will have to continue paying for disability facilities grants or people will have to unroot themselves and move house, when, with a bit of consideration, you could have prevented that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Purton, do you want to come back on that one? Or?
Well, who's allowed developers to escape their responsibilities by pretending that things aren't viable? It's a bit hypocritical, really. There shouldn't be any let-outs, but unfortunately, that is what the current arrangements are. So if a property developer can show by fiddling around with the figures that they can't afford to do something then unfortunately they're allowed to get away with it. And I deprecate that as much as Councillor Carter does, only I deprecate it in principle, not just because it affects something that I'm particularly interested in.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Purton. Are there any more comments? I see Councillor Durkin's got his hand up now for comments.
Sorry, Chair, I was only going to come back on Councillor Carter's assumption, and all I can do is refer to what we do when we build, and absolutely everything that we build is on modern structure, modern design that absolutely enables the flexibility for the building to be used at the right time for the right reasons. Because historically, you're absolutely right, we had outrageous developers who just threw up houses to make a quick profit without looking at the impact and effect that would have on the householder or the future community. But I'm absolutely confident that where we can influence those developers, but also I can give you our assurance that Harlow Council, when we are building our council homes, they will be houses that will be fit for purpose for anybody at any time when they are in their life. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Durkin. And I don't think I've spoken on this, so I will just say a couple of words. There are some very good private developers, but unfortunately there are some that are not so good. And I think we've seen far too much shoddy accommodation thrown up for private gain, often at the taxpayer's extent, that's caused damage to Harlow. And I think we all know what I'm talking about here. Who is it who enables this? Well, it's the government in power at the time. And we are constrained by government legislation, unfortunately. That being said, are we happy to accept recommendations? I think it's just A and B. Bear with me, page 56. A and B on page 56.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. So now we move on to item 12, fire safety works, Edmonds Tower. Councillor Wilkinson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I will be moving this report. I normally wouldn't say a few words at a contract award, and usually it's a legal formality and a straightforward formality. But I think it would be remiss of me tonight not to say a few words about this particular contract award. A very important subject, very close to everyone's heart at the moment. This award is for nearly £1.5 million to improve fire safety in tower blocks, 3 tower blocks in this town. I think it just underlines the commitment from this council, this administration on fireworks. At a time where the Greenfield inquiry is publicly being played out every day in the national press, and it's basically revealing horror story after horror story. I think this is a really important step forward. We were prudent enough a few years ago to put money to one side for fire safety, and tonight I'm really pleased to see us awarding such an important contract. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I haven't had a formal seconder. Councillor Harvey, are you seconding this?
I am. I was just waiting to be brought in. Yes.
Oh, thank you. Are there any questions? I'll go to questions and I'll come back to comments. Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, totally agree with Councillor Wilkinson. This is obviously much needed and valued work. And if I were to be voting, I would be supporting it. I just have a couple of technical questions. The Lawns is a Grade 2 listed building, the first high-rise residential block constructed in the UK. I presume that listed building consent has been included in the work plan for this building.
Councillor Wilkinson or Andrew Murray, would you like to answer that? You're on mute, Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Wilkinson, you're on mute.
I'm happy to hand over to Andrew Murray for a technical answer, but I believe the question is okay. Yes, Scott.
Yes, all the necessary arrangements have been made, Councillor Carter, for this work to continue. Forms part of our wider tower block plans for fire safety.
Good. Second question, if I may, Chair. The works on the other two buildings do not include sprinklers. Is this because the method of construction does not expose the residents to the same risks as those in more modern buildings?
Shall I pass it straight on to Andrew Murray, Councillor Wilkinson? Andrew Murray.
The tower blocks which we have considered for our regional fire safety risk assessments, there was a decision made not to include sprinklers as part of our fire safety improvements. That's because they weren't suitable in most of our tower blocks, and lawns fits into that category. If I'm being asked very directly, there's probably only one tower block which isn't the lawns that may be suitable for sprinklers, and we'll wait the outcome from the Grenfell inquiry as to resources for that and what that means for our fire risk assessments.
Thank you.
Thank you, Batch. Thank you.
I've got a question from Councillor Danvers.
Thank you, Chair. It's for Andrew, really. It's the same old question, really. We have the lowest price winning, yet the highest price, in fact, came in terms of quality. Is there any examples recently where quality has won over price?
Not in my experience in the last 10 years, because of the resources available and the compromise and evaluation required for the price quality matrix. And with all our contract awards, there is always a consideration of the type of contract to be awarded in terms of that price quality matrix.
Could I possibly, Chair, supplement Andrew Murray's answer there? Assure Councillor Davis, Councillor Danvers and all councillors that all tenders that are received all meet the standards that the council wants. Some may have higher standards than others, but can I assure Councillor Danvers that all the tenders received did meet the required standards for this work?
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. So let's move on to any comments. Oh, sorry, Councillor Johnson, is that a question?
No, Chair, it's a comment.
Okay, far away.
Thank you, Chair. I can't read a report or speak on a report about fire safety works or any works on tower blocks without finding myself getting emotional about Grenfell, and I'm sure that's the case for all of the councillors from both political sides on this in this chamber. And I cast my mind back to the immediate aftermath of Grenfell, and Harlow was one of those councils that the TV news crews came to because of the historic work under administrations of all different colours, whether it be Labour, Conservative or joint, including the Liberal Democrats from both sides. That fire safety works, our officers have been very, I won't say the word hot on, for fear of a poor pun, but had been very keen to ensure we're always kept up to date. And it was a real pleasure in the chamber after that absolute disaster to join from both sides of the political divide to comment on how well our officers had kept over the years the fire safety as an important issue in our tower blocks. And I'm really pleased to see this come back, and I'm pleased to offer support from the opposition for these works. And I understand what Mr. Murray's saying about waiting for the decisions from Grenfell for the sprinklers, but I'm also slightly softened by his view that actually they wouldn't be appropriate for a number of our buildings anyway, and that leaves me satisfied that we're not excessively putting any residents at risk as a council. So support from the opposition for this one. I'm glad to hear the answer to Councillor Carter's question around the lawns, because of course it is a national landmark itself, and I think our tenants can be rightly satisfied that the officers continue to take real care of our residents in our tower blocks. So thank you, Chair, and this has the opposition's support.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Any further comments? So let's, are we all happy to accept recommendation A?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Brings us on to, thank you. Brings us on to item 13, the HTS Property and Environment Limited Contract Awards 21-22. Councillor Wilkinson, are you moving this?
I formally move this report, Chair. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. You'll have to excuse Councillor Charles and myself.
Indeed.
They would be placed into a room, Chair.
I'll second it. And if Councillor Charles and yourself, Councillor Carter, could excuse yourselves.
They've been put in the waiting room, Chair, so you can.
They've been put in the waiting room. Am I talking to empty chairs there? Okay. Councillor Wilkinson.
No, I was going to say this is obviously another award for external and internal work. Obviously, HTS has been a really good success story for this council, and I'm really pleased again that we continue to award them work. They're high quality work, done extremely well by a company that this council set up. And this is quite a straightforward report, and I look forward to our continued partnership with HTS.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Any questions? Any comments? Councillor Vince.
Yeah, really just to reiterate what Councillor Wilkinson said about the success story that HTS has been. I think the other thing to say about HTS is it's really become kind of part of the Harlow's community. Not only is it supporting the local community, supporting our tenants, but also supporting the environment in the work they do. But also it's a massive employer for Harlow as well. And having obviously been in a previous situation where I would have also been expelled from this meeting, but not anymore because I've obviously changed roles. I've seen firsthand, how dedicated the staff are to making our town even better, and I want to sort of say thank you to them and thank you to the new directors from both sides, both political parties, for the continued work that they do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Vince, and I'm going to take this opportunity to publicly thank all of the workers at HTS for the excellent service they give this town. Failing any more comments, I'm going to move to the recommendation then. Sorry, is that somebody who wants to make a comment? Okie doke. I'm hearing noises off.
No, I think, Mark, we're just keen to agree with the recommendation. I think that's what it is.
Agreed. Agreed.
Happy to accept the recommendation.
Agreed.
Agreed. So I have no communications from committees, working groups, parties or panels. Item 14. Item 15 is noting the minutes of panels, working groups. Are we happy to note those? I have one very short item of urgent business. Councillor Edwards.
Sorry, I did have a comment on the highways panel. Sorry, that I did raise my hand briefly.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Just
let's go back to that then.
Yeah, item 14.
Yep.
I am concerned, continue to be concerned about the state of the North Gate roundabout. I've brought it up on several occasions. I've brought it up here at Cabinet on occasions and at full council. In part, it's due to the design of the roundabout, so it's very, very difficult for anybody to get on that roundabout to actually maintain it. I've raised it with I've raised it with the county councillors, who say that basically the roundabout has been restored. It's now over to the district council to maintain it. The district council's point of view is because of the design of the roundabout, you can't get onto the blooming thing to maintain it. In the meantime, the roundabout continues to be a complete eyesore. So, and in terms of this, in terms of pride within the town, it would seem to me that somehow or other, the two councils need to work together to get that matter resolved, really, as soon as possible, as quickly as possible. And I appreciate there may well be a standoff on both sides, but somehow or other we need to get that one sorted. It's been going on now for, well, I've been on the council for 3.5 years, 4 years, and it's been a state for all the time that I've been on the council, with the exception of a brief while whereby when it was first redesigned, the weeds have been cut down at that point, but subsequently they've all grown back. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. So now let's move on to your point of urgent business. Can we, Councillor Edwards?
Yeah, just briefly, Harlow Central Library, just to let councillors know that the final day for public consultation is tomorrow evening. Is a Zoom meeting, so if councillors want to attend that, apparently what you have to do is contact somebody called Emma O'Malley at the County Council in order to make certain you can be booked in for that meeting. That's right, Councillor Hardware. I attended one on Tuesday. I was a bit concerned to see, whilst on the one hand it would be churlish not to welcome any additional investment into Harlow Library and finally sort of an improvement. On the other hand, it's worth noting that the actual floor space available for library at the end for the library usage at the end of the project is small, will be smaller than it currently is at the moment. And the other sort of point was that I believe that the book stock for Harlow Library is somewhere around about 37,000. Compare that with Chelmsford, where it's over 80,000. And one wonder, and given that we are an expanding town, I wonder what provision has been put in to allow for that. But I would encourage people to attend the meeting tomorrow evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Edwards. Perhaps we can make available. Yeah, perhaps we can make available the link to that meeting. It's I welcome the fact that Essex County Council are consulting, and I'd encourage as many councillors as possible to go along. Councillor Hardware.
Small point of information. Councillor Edwards said it's tomorrow evening. It's actually tomorrow afternoon, between 4 and 5.
Thank you.
Okay, and I'll ask somebody to circulate the details of how they can attend. Thank you. At that point, thank you for